Scientology could be called, well, you could call it a religion of religions.
Howdy everybody, and welcome to the Indie Scientology podcast with your host Andy Nolch, the Space Cowboy. Today's podcast is a closed-door secret briefing on psychology, and psychiatry. So be prepared to hear some shocking information. Actually, the first thing that got me into Scientology was that I watched a DVD called The Industry of Death, produced by Scientologists, and it talks about psychiatry, and it talks about the badness of it. And I saw the DVD, and it didn't say anything about Scientology, but I knew it was made by Scientologists, and I liked the DVD, and I agreed, because I thought psychology was full of shit. I thought it was like just not good, or just sort of a scam or something. I didn't fully know all the reasons why, but it made me think good of Scientologists, because I thought, oh, that's really nice that they actually didn't try and sell me on Scientology or anything, didn't even mention anything about Scientology, but they just made this DVD because they want to expose the bullshit of psychology. So you can probably find the Industry of Death DVD. In fact, I'll put a link to it in the comment section, I think you might be able to watch it for free on YouTube, but it's actually kind of like a conspiracy DVD, because it's like the conspiracy of psychology, right? And technically, this is actually the first conspiracy thing I've ever watched, because I did watch a conspiracy thing on how the moon landings were faked in like Year 9 science class, but then the teacher went to say how all the points they brought up were false. And so they said, see, you can get tricked by certain things. And overall, the message of it was that, I guess, not to believe in conspiracy things, because it's like saying that their arguments might sound okay, but then if you look into them further, their arguments are full of holes. But the real truth about that moon landing faked documentary, right, that we had to watch in school, was that was probably actually made by NASA themselves, so that then they could just discredit it and say, see, those people who think the moon landings were fake are full of bullshit. Do you see what I mean? That's one of the clever tactics that you use, is that you don't, if you're doing something and you want to try and cover it up, you don't just let, like, let's say you're doing something illegal and Alex Jones is exposing it, right? You don't just let him make a documentary exposing it, because he'll bring up good points. You find a guy and make him be the guy that's going to be exposing it. And when he makes his little exposing documentary, you put mistakes in that documentary and you pick all the bad reasons supporting the conspiracy, right? Ignore the good reasons supporting it, but put all the bad reasons. So then it's put out there and it gets all popular and people go, yeah, I think that's a conspiracy. And then you go, no, look, that documentary is wrong. This point's wrong, this point's wrong, this point's wrong. And then you can discredit it. You see what I mean? A similar thing happens where OSA will try and secretly contact me and give me bad information, so that then I say the bad information and then they can prove that wrong and say, see, Andy's a dumb guy. He's said wrong stuff. Do you see what I mean? So these are the games of conspiracy and stuff. But anyway, on the moon topic, just because I brought it up, the footage was faked. It was absolutely faked. They went to the moon. They've been to Mars. They've communicated with aliens. They're working with them in underground bases. The aliens, I think, even helped them get to the moon, right? And when they went to the moon, they actually visited ancient alien ruins to get information from, because you can learn about the science, and maybe they could have found a crashed flying saucer. But you want to investigate ancient ruins. You know, they do it on Earth, but they also do it on the moon and on Mars, right? Okay, but they couldn't let the public know. They had to keep it all secret. So they literally filmed the moon landings in a film studio, and what you're seeing is actors. Like, you are not seeing the real deal. You don't see what they really are doing, because NASA's keeping the whole alien thing secret. So they're not going to say, oh yeah, we're doing Apollo 11 and we're going to the moon and we're checking out an alien ruins, and also we're actually hitchhiking a ride on a UFO to go to the moon. The aliens are helping us. No, they had to keep a whole alien topic completely covered up. So they had to show fake footage of the Apollo 11 thing, and it was all the black ops. And Stanley Kubrick exposes it in his movie, The Shining, which is just a really cool movie. But, I mean, that's not the only reason why I think the footage is fake. There's all these other reasons why. But I went totally off topic there, but I just want to say that because sometimes people go, do you think the moon landing was fake? And it's just like, no, the footage was fake, but they really went. That's why things are so much more complex than what you think. Another reason why they couldn't let people know what the moon actually looks like is because if they showed real footage, Russian scientists would see what the surface of the moon is like and how the astronauts walk and bounce, and they can work out good information, good intel to help them with their space program. So NASA didn't want to do that. They wanted to film it in a film studio and show wrong weights and wrong calculations and all this stuff, so that then the Russian scientists and the other scientists from other countries get confused, and then America is like the only people on the moon, because that's a good piece of territory that you want. You don't want the other countries getting there. They had their eye, and I think the Nazis had their eye on the moon in the 40s or whatever as well. It was like they knew that if you get the moon, that's an awesome military location to have. So that's why America got there first, and they put information out there to try and discourage other people from going there, so it's just their territory. So there's so much more going on that we don't understand, right? Anyway, so about psychology and psychiatry. So I already knew that psychology was a bit of a piece of shit because I went to a psychologist when I was depressed in like 2010. I went a few times, and the lady was nice, and we just spoke, and it was just like talking to a cousin or something like that. And it wasn't like the person sat down and said, okay, you got depression? All right. Well, this is what you do to cure depression, blah, 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 blah. What it was just talking that I could almost do with anyone, right? And also, I asked for it. I wanted to try antidepressants because I thought, hey, I want to have happy pills. And if there is some sort of chemical imbalance in my brain, I don't want to have a chemical imbalance in my brain. So I asked for the antidepressants, and I'd tried them for a few months, and I'd gone to the therapy for a few times, and I realized that the antidepressants just weren't working. I spoke to this guy in a sauna, and I think he'd tried them before in the past, antidepressants, and somehow it came up that I was on antidepressants, and he said to me, you should get off them, they're shit, like they're crappy, they're not good, like unhealthy and stuff. So he was switched on. He was switched on that psychology was just a load of crap and the antidepressants were shit. And so then I just, I'd actually improved a bit because I'd actually started doing meditation by accident, right? I'd actually started doing OTTR0 by accident because at that stage I was going to the gym and I wanted to get a tan and stuff. And so daily I was just lying in the sun for like 25 minutes. And that's like the same as sitting in a chair and doing OTTR0 or just sitting in a chair and doing meditation because I was just lying there, right? And just that act of lying there, just relaxes someone and it puts them in a good mood. And also I was getting sunlight, and sunlight helps with depression as well because I'd been working night shift and my sleeping patterns had been wrecked and I hadn't been getting any sunlight, and that contributes to depression. And there was actually all these reasons why I was getting depression, right? That if somebody came to me with depression, I would be able to tell them all these things in order to solve the problem. But I bet you go see a psychologist today, one of these government ones, and they're not going to tell you actual ways to cure depression. Like the psychologist never said to me, oh, Andy, so you work night shift, so you got barely any sunlight. Well, that causes depression, so what you need to do is get some sunlight. No, I went into the sun because I wanted to get a tan, right? I was going through a stage where I was getting a bit obsessed with the body and I wanted to get really good muscles and stuff, and I was just playing that game at that time. Which is kind of a fun game. When you get into it, you pump the muscles and you get the high from the what is it called? The endorphins from the high or whatever, and you look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, yeah, it looks so good, and you do, you do feel good. When you see yourself actually change and you see your weight change and you see you can pump heavier weights, you feel like you're being caused and you feel like you're winning and stuff. Anyway, so, I mean, the psychologist didn't say, I mean, even the psychologist said, well, eating good helps with depression, but she didn't tell me what eating good was. Do you know what I mean? So they just don't have workable technology. It's like if you got a heart attack or whatever, a doctor can come and like do something to fix your heart or whatever. Like, well, maybe let's say you've got a I don't know. Let's say you've got a burst puppix in your stomach or some shit. Well, the doctor will come and he'll cut it out or something, or do something, and then you're like fine. Like let's say a broken arm, they'll come and they'll put a cast on it, and a few months later your arm will be fine. Like other doctors can actually heal things, but the psychologists and that, it's like they don't have that same sort of success rate where they go, oh, okay, so you've got this, then you just do this, and then that cures a problem, right? So it's just a bit of a crock of shit. So that's when I watched the Psychiatry Industry of Death DVD that I'll put in the comment section. That's why when I watched this conspiracy DVD, it rang true for me because I was aware that psychiatry is a crock of crap. Like it's just not quite that good, you know. And I was also aware how psychology in high school was not considered one of the more harder subjects, and I was kind of aware, I guess, that it's like looked down upon a bit as not quite good as the other sciences and stuff and the other doctors. But when I watched that Psychiatry Industry of Death DVD, I thought that was an exaggeration because I didn't know about all the things about psychiatry and the people getting damaged in the institutions and stuff and electroshocked and all that sort of stuff. So I watched this and I thought, okay, these Scientologists hate these psyos. They're exaggerating what the psyos are doing, but they're not... These psyos are exaggerating what the psychologists are doing, but they are not wrong. Like they're actually heading in the right direction. They're actually trying to expose a bullshit industry, right? And I mean, in that DVD, it mentions how like there was a plan to get everyone on psych drugs. And to me, years ago, I mean, I just wouldn't believe that. It's too much of a conspiracy. But now it's like I know that, yeah, totally. I'm sure that's what they would want. Absolutely. The drug companies and the psychologists would want everybody on psych drugs so that they can make money. And also because there tends to be suppressive, evil people in control of those groups. And they enjoy controlling people. And they like people to be on drugs because they're easier to control. And they love ripping people off. And now I know also about the New World Order and the governments and all that sort of stuff, and they want their citizens all high on drugs because then the civilization is easier to control and take advantage of. They don't want people detoxing and healthy and strong and switched on to their bullshit. They just want them sitting there going, I'm on a happy pill. I feel fantastic. Yeah, I'm happy. They just want people like that's how they want people, basically. They're easier to control, you know, and that's probably... Anyway, goes real deep. But the thing with psychology is that, so the first thing I guess majorly wrong with it is it doesn't really have any cures. It doesn't do that much. Secondly, the things that it does recommend doesn't benefit the person. Like, for example, the antidepressants, that actually turns a person into a medical drug addict, and then they have to pay money for the antidepressants for years and years and years. And if they try to get off these psych drugs, they get violent side effects. And they think that, oh, I'm crazy. I must need those psych drugs. I better go back onto them. And it's like, no, you're not crazy. You're withdrawing from the side effects of the drugs. The drugs are bad and they're harming you and stuff. So I would say long-term, these psych drugs actually cause brain damage, just like any type of long-term drug use causes brain damage, except the hallucinogenics. I think that they're a whole different class of drug. I don't even think they're drugs. They're out of this world. They're something different. I mean, you take DMT and you're suddenly like surrounded by alien doctors and they're working on your mind. And you're like, what the hell? And they're like repairing shit. And you're like, whoa. So, I mean, it's so out there. I mean, you take DMT, right? And you have a realization that you shouldn't take drugs. Like, if you're a drug addict, because I heard this about a drug addict, he took some sort of hallucinogenic drug, and he had an hallucination where he saw a spirit or an alien or something, and the alien, like, said to him, you know, come on, pull your head in, stop being a drug addict, because there was other drugs that he was taking, right? So the hallucinogenics give people these crazy spiritual experiences where they go into another dimension, right? And it actually tells them good messages like don't take drugs, right? Because the person's being a slave to cocaine or marijuana or something else, right? But the hallucinogenics, there's something else. People aren't addicted to the hallucinogenics. There's no one been addicted to the hallucinogenics. Someone can have a bad trip when it's done wrong in the wrong environment or something like that. And that's why it is something that you need to be careful with and you need to do it the right way. But it's not the same as psych drugs. It's not the same as cocaine. It's not the same as ecstasy. They have a whole different feeling to them. They're just like, whoa. In fact, if you have some really hardcore Kundalini yoga sessions, you fire up your pineal in the same way that your pineal is fired up from when you take DMT. So anyway, and also the police actually don't treat the hallucinogenics the same as they do the other drugs anyway, because there's not addicts that are causing problems to society that are on hallucinogenics. Like, just stop and think about it for a second. Have you ever seen somebody who's like, oh, there's Jim. Yeah, he's like sucking dick for LSD. Like, it's just like that. That isn't happening. You know what I mean? But it's happening with the ice, with the ecstasy, with the cocaine, with the marijuana, with the heroin. These are the classic bad drugs, and with the doctor drugs and the medical drugs and stuff, the psych drugs and stuff. They're the ones that are actually harming people. But maybe that's a whole other vid going into hallucinogenics. But I just want to let people know that because people think that Scientologists are completely against drugs, and really pretty much all of them are, except me. But I just want to let people know that I'm a Scientologist that actually can see the therapeutic use in hallucinogenic drugs, the ayahuasca, the DMT, the magic mushrooms, right? You know, I mean, I don't have much more to say. The fact that people can take these substances and cure depression. That's another thing as well. I mean, doctors were experimenting with these things in the 50s and 60s, but of course, Big Pharma didn't take them on. Why? Because it didn't make slaves. It didn't make addicts. It wasn't like you'd take like 5 times you'd take mushrooms. You don't even need to take them 5 times, but that's it. You didn't have a lifelong customer. You also had someone who was more awake, more switched on spiritually, and wasn't a slave, and they don't want that. And that's why there was all these rebels back in the 60s and stuff. Like, all of a sudden, instead of doing what the government says, they were saying, fuck the government. You know what I mean? What the hell's going on with the Vietnam War? And they were suddenly stopping just growing up and being a Christian that makes babies and works a 9-to-5 job, which the generation prior to 1935, all the people who were born prior to 1935, they were totally into just being a Christian, growing up, having a family, having a house, and working a 9-to-5. But then things got really funky in the 60s when people started mixing around with these hallucinogenics, because they started having spiritual experiences, they started waking up out of the matrix, they started not being conformist and started rebelling against their governments and saying, no, this is wrong, why should I do this? And they started rebelling against their parents because they just stopped being brainwashed slaves. Anyway, so this is another reason why I'm happy I got into this whole hallucinogenic thing. This is another reason why psychiatry is bad, because they know that these things work. The people at the top tried it in the 60s and stuff. They know that, like, you can give it to someone and it can cure their depression and their PTSD, but of course they don't prescribe it. They prescribe their crappy antidepressants or whatever. Now, another reason why, so that's just evil, basically. Basically, like the psychiatrists and the psychologists, right? They are taken over by Big Pharma. Do you know how in Scientology, how the Church of Scientology was taken over by Miscavige and RTC, and it wrecked the whole subject of Scientology in the church? Well, what happened with psychiatry and psychology is that Big Pharma, the drug pushers, took over those practices to make sure that it was taught at universities and all that sort of stuff. It was taught that you give out the antidepressant, and you do this form of therapy, which barely works, and you do shock therapy and stuff, which just damages the person, right? So it's basically an industry that's been taken over by professional drug dealers that wear suits and that are allowed to deal drugs legally. And not only that, the government pays for their drugs. Like, I'm not kidding. The big pharma are drug dealers, but drug dealers that have gotten in bed with the government and have gotten laws passed that it's okay to use their drugs and call them medicines. See, that's a little public relations thing. You don't call it drugs, you call it medicine. You know. Now, there's another thing that's also really interesting about psych drugs, right, that I've noticed, is that what they do is they make people unable to have orgasms, right? And basically, they stop a guy from coming. Now, that assists in the depopulation agenda that I talk about. And it also assists in people who are messed up, who have mental health problems. It makes it harder for them to have more children. And so it's kind of like a eugenics thing where it's keeping the race pure. It's almost like a Nazi idea to try and stop all the degenerates that are on psych drugs, to try and stop them from having more children. But that's a nasty little side effect that they've added into it. So there's social engineering that's been added into the psych drugs. Like, I'm sure, because I've looked into it, I'm sure that it's not just an accident that one of the side effects is that a guy can't come. Like, I bet you it has something to do with them, these drugs being designer made, and they designer made them in the 50s or 60s or 70s, and they released them knowing that it would stop these nutters, the people who have mental health problems, from being able to make babies. I'm serious. Like, I'm certain of it, right? Well, pretty sure. Because not only do they actually, they want to reduce the population, and they want to stop everyone from having kids, right? The people who don't have mental health problems from having kids. But I bet you that would be for the nutters not having kids as well. And it will be easier to get that passed in the upper circles, like the high levels of the Freemasons or the Illuminati, wherever these ideas are coming from. The people would adopt to it and go, yeah, of course we shouldn't let that person with addiction problems easily have children, because they're just passing that on to their kids in their genes, and it's promoting bad genetics across the human race. And yeah, we should totally make it hard for them to come, basically. Now, hold on, I went a bit off topic. So, what was I saying about psychology? Oh, so the next thing is that their electric shock therapy and stuff. They did electric shock therapy, and I think they still do electric shock therapy today, right? Which is pretty wild, because it's like there's a mental problem with someone, and then you just zap their brain, and it doesn't actually cure the problem. It just makes the person, like, be dull, just the same as if I knocked you in the head real hard. You'd be like, whoa, what the hell? And you'd calm down. It's just like a big boom, and it zaps the person. It zaps the nutter, and then the nutter's like, oh, okay, yeah. And so it doesn't cure the nutter. So you shouldn't do that. I mean, I just think that that's a barbaric torture thing. Like, if the nutter is causing problems, actually, I don't know if I should say my real answer to that question, but I'm not saying I'd support a politician who introduced this, but I understand how it might just be easy to knock them off. Like, and I know that sounds totally evil, but it's just like they're bleeding government resources and they're just sitting there banging their head against the wall going, and it's just like, I don't know if I want taxpayer money to go towards keeping that person alive. They're a write-off. Do you know what I mean? It's the same as when you see an old cat and it's struggling to live, and you don't want that cat to have a really torturous last year of its life, so you just end it while it's still alive, and then the cat dies peacefully. Like, that person is a tortured person and going, and so it's like you either try and cure them with techniques that actually work, or you just knock them off. Or you put them in like a work camp and use them for like, if they can be used in some sort of way, you use them to help build roads or something like that. You know what I mean? But look, I know lefties are going to have a hernia that I actually said that. And even Scientologists, because Scientologists are against a lot of the deaths which psychiatry has caused, because they've caused lots of deaths. And that's another thing. One of the side effects of the antidepressants and the psych drugs is suicide. And I don't think that that's accident. I don't think that's accidental. I think that they worked out that when they put this chemical in the little mix-up thing, it makes a person want to kill themselves. So that way we reduce the population and we stop that person from making babies. And then, like, it's a designer drug, like made by evil psychs. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I think that there's more to that. I don't think it's accidental that psych drugs increase suicide rates. I think it's more like that's the purpose of them. And then they control the media, the big pharma control the media so no one finds out, and then just the nutters get killed off and die. Anyway, so I got to clear this up, because what I have said is outrageous. But I was at the swimming pool one day and one of these nutters walked past that was like, or something like that, and I saw the carer walking with him, and I just thought, I feel sorry for that carer. I mean, that carer's life, because the carer looked drained, and I was like, as if he has to put up with this retard. And also, like, can't he do something better with his life? Like, can't he make jam and sell, like, jam in a shop and actually contribute something cool to society, like good jam? Or be, like, a good Scientologist auditor or something? Or be, like, a good computer guy? Like, he's being wasted by this mentally handicapped person that's just going, and it's just like, when do we draw the line and actually say, no, we need to knock him off? Like, when is it okay to do that? Because I know with animals, they say it's okay. When they see a horse that's just living a cruel, like a stuffed up, like it's got a broken leg and it won't get any better, they'll knock the horse off. Like, when it comes to the cat that's old or the dog that's old, the owner will take responsibility, especially if he's a strong, sensible man. He will say, it's time for the dog to say goodbye, and they'll inject the dog with a lethal thing. That's normal sense. But when it comes to humans, suddenly it's like, we can't knock them off. It's just like, I don't know, but I just feel like in an ideal society, we would have some sort of cure for these mental problems. And if the person is actually brain damaged from a car accident and just cannot recover, there should be a government thing where they're saying, okay, well, it's euthanasia, maybe that's the word, euthanasia, and he's going to get the lethal injection and he just needs to be knocked off because he's costing money. We don't want to have some staff member have their time wasted by having to put up with walking around with a guy going, and stuff. And if I was that retard, I would want to die as well. I would probably do it myself. I'll be like, and I'll get near a cliff and I'll be like, oh, my carer's not looking. Yes, I'll jump and kill myself and start again. Like, I don't know. I don't see how this is such an outrageous idea. Like, this is just normal common sense. It's just like, yeah. And I don't want to even go further in that some of those people I think are SPs and stuff, and that they've postulated that's how they're going to be and stuff. I don't want to go all the way down there because I'm just going to so offend the lefties and they'll just attack me like there's no tomorrow and take this video out of context or whatever. But I'm sure you can understand, like the same as when I saw my grandpa get old and die. I mean, I just thought that is not how I would want to die. I would have wanted to have been knocked off a few years earlier, for sure. Like, I think that was cruel what they put him through, letting him stay alive in that tortured condition and stuff. And because he was gone in the head, he probably couldn't decide what he was going to do anyway. So you couldn't tell them, hey, I want you to knock me off. I mean, it was just cruel and it was just so wrong. And when my parents get to that stage where I can see that they're no longer functioning like the mentally handicapped person, I'll say to them, hey, do you want me to solve... are you ready? Like, do you want to end it or whatever? Or do you want to stay alive and have a miserable last few years of your life or last few months or whatever and be tortured and stuff? So, I mean, it's just... Hopefully I've got people who look after me, and hopefully I can tell that I'm losing my marbles and I end it myself. But if I lose my marbles suddenly, like I have a stroke or whatever, and then I can't think right, hopefully the people who are around me can see that I'm not getting better, can see that I'm being tortured just by being alive, and they will arrange some sort of injection on me. I assume that I'll be around people who, love me and who are smart and who aren't scared to do these sorts of things and will help solve the problem. You know what I mean? But I just want to let people know that, that I think that you're fucking cruel, you lefties and stuff. You people go, oh, I think you're cruel by keeping those mentally handicapped people alive in that tortured condition that they are in. And I'm just saying, go and spend time in a psych ward. Spend time with somebody who is gone in the head and see them cry and then go crazy, then go happy, and see how their existence is horrible and like a crazy, sick dream. Nightmare, crazy, sick nightmare. When you actually see it with your own eyes, you go, oh, it's actually cruel to keep them alive. Anyway. But I'm not supporting psychiatry opening up death camps or anything because... Anyway, I'm just not supporting that. I just want to make that clear. But I could see how it could work. And that's actually what the Nazis kind of did. I think they just... Instead of secretly sterilizing the mentally ill people, they just openly sterilized the mentally ill people, which is actually nicer than secretly doing it. And also, instead of secretly killing them, I think they just openly killed them and gave them what I'm talking about, the lethal injection, where they were just like, these people are tortured and have bad bodies, and so they just knocked them off. And so, I think I can kind of agree with that. Like, I think when I first heard it, I thought, yeah, what's wrong with... Like, I didn't think there was anything wrong with that, Anyway, so... So what psychiatry were doing with their electric shock treatment is they were keeping people alive and shocking them and just basically sort of torturing them. And why were they doing it? Well, it was probably because it was a good money maker, really. The same way as medical doctors use chemo as a good money maker, and it doesn't really cure cancer. With this electric shock treatment, they were probably charging the taxpayer a decent amount of money to do these shocks on patients, and it wasn't curing them, it was just making them into a vegetable. So instead of jumping around, they were going like this because they'd been electrocuted. But hey, that's all right. The psychiatrist gets money for the surgery, and that's how they view it. And also, there's more evil people who are psychologists and psychiatrists, so they enjoy causing harm to other people. Like, they enjoy popping someone's car tires and then watching the person be like, oh damn, my car tires are popped. Oh, like that. They get a little thrill out of that. Like, they get a thrill out of like molesting a little kid and like raping them and hitting them or something like that. Like, they're completely different to normal people. They enjoy inflicting harm on others, right? So that's why whoever came up with the idea to do electric shock therapy, zapping the brain, that's why they thought, oh, this is cool, and they enjoy it. They get off to it. They enjoy electric shocking someone and harming them and stuff. And and if anything, they probably enjoy keeping them alive and stuff in this vegetable state because they watched this victim that they've created and they're like, yeah, that's right, take that sucker. That's actually how they think and they feel. They feel good about that. They will joke about it to their other psychologist friend. They'll be like, yeah, so I zapped him. He couldn't eat those potatoes. Like that's how they feel. They just enjoy it, and it's normal behavior for them. You know, there's real sickos out there. You have to understand that. There's people who eat dead bodies, and they're cool with it. So that's what I'm saying. Like, don't think that other people are like you. They're completely different. Like, there are some people out there who are completely different. So psychology and psychiatry tend to attract evil people. So this is another reason, is that you don't want to go to them for advice or therapy because they're going to give you evil advice or they're going to do a shit job. The same way as you don't want to go to an evil car mechanic. Like, he's unlikely to do a good job fixing your car. He's more likely to run some sort of scam on you. And even if he is good at fixing cars, I don't know if it even exists, evil people who actually do an honest job and can do it well. Because he's evil, he'll probably say some negative comment to you while you're there, like, oh, your hair looks shit, or oh, you're a loser because you're a doctor, or something like that, like some sort of comment that attacks you and puts you down. He'll probably say that while you're picking up your car. So that's also why you want to avoid psychology and psychiatry. So one thing you might be wondering is, why are these industries like psychology and psychiatry still around if they don't really work? Because if you think about the mechanic example, he goes out of business because if he's doing a shit job on fixing people's cars, people don't take their car to him. So why is psychology and psychiatry around? Well, they're dealing with customers that aren't that smart. Let's be honest, they're mentally ill. The customers are mentally ill, so they're easier to take advantage of, right? So they're not going to quite, because they're gone in the head, they're not going to spot that it's a waste of time and that it's a scam. It's going to be harder for them to spot it. Secondly, with a car, it's really obvious that the car hasn't been fixed because you hop in it and you drive, it doesn't work. With the therapy, they can say to you, no, you're getting better. No, you don't understand, you're getting better. Because it's a non-physical thing that they can't see with their own eyes. They can say, no, it's good for you to take these psych drugs. Yeah, they're working and stuff. And like, it's easier for the psychologist to spin bullshit to encourage people to keep on going to them, right? And also the fact that talking to someone is a nice thing and you can't deny that. So some people get something from, like, you get something from talking to a psychologist. So that in itself is going to make people want to come back because it's someone to talk to. But the main reason why these industries are still around, even though they're crappy, is the fact that they're government funded. And this is why the government's so evil and it's just ballooned and gone out of control, because it's just doing outrageous things like taking taxpayers' money and spending it on these psychologists and psychiatrists. So I went over the antidepressants, they don't work, but the government still pay for it. I went over the electric shock therapy, it doesn't work, but the government pays for it. But I'm sure there are people out there who have paid of their own volition. They've paid themselves for electric shock therapy. There's probably some people out there, but the majority, and the same with psych drugs, but the majority of these things are coming from government funding programs and stuff. And so that's why they're still around, because the customer isn't paying for it. The customer is mentally ill and can't afford it, right? I guarantee you, if the customer had to pay for the electric shock therapy, it wouldn't be a problem. It wouldn't exist because no one would go to them. They'll go, I'm not paying 25 grand for that. Sorry. There'll just be no customers, right? But what's happened is Big Pharma, which has taken over psychology and psychiatry have gotten their little fingers into the government and are working their little magic to make sure that the government keeps on thinking that their services are essential and that that's what money should be apportioned to in the budget. Do you see what I mean? And the fact that they've got the media on their side as well. So the media isn't actually talking about legitimate therapies that work, isn't exposing how electric shock therapy is bad and how psych drugs are bad. So that then the politicians and the prime ministers, the government and all that, they don't find out that they're actually wasting money on psychology and psychiatry. So in an ideal world, you wouldn't be able to get rid of these sort of scams, but you wouldn't be able to get away with this sort of scam for long term, but they're able to keep these long-term scams going. And it's not just psychology and psychiatry. There are so many other scams that are being run within the government that are just wastes of money, right? But because, let's say you build ships for the Navy. You have your guy in the parliament or whatever. So you have your staff member that's in communication with the politician, and you make sure that that staff member continues promoting that we need to have Navy boats. And then the government awards a contract to build Navy boats, and you go, yes, I've got Navy boats. And then you look and you go, oh my God, my Navy boat building contract will run out in 2 years. And you go, oh, we've got to go up to the politicians now and keep on telling them, oh, it's dangerous, and we need to build these Navy boats and stuff to keep that whole cycle going, that you keep on making Navy boats and you keep on making money. So it's not just psychology and psychiatry, it's other industries. They're all just milking the government like there's no tomorrow, and they're milking a taxpayer essentially. This is why the government is in such a horrific condition. It's crazy, and I think the bankers have a lot to do with this because the bankers want to encourage the government's spending programs because they want to get the government in debt so that then they can do a form of predatory lending where they lend them a ton of money, the government doesn't pay it back, and then they can score the railway network, or they can score the water supply of the country, or they can score the special mines with gold under the ground area or something like that. It's predatory lending, basically. I don't know if you know that. I don't know if I want to go into that whole topic. L. Ron Hubbard mentioned it, actually, how the bankers who were in charge of this world are trying to get all the governments bankrupt so that then they can take over those countries. But it's one way of, when you owe someone money, they then legally can come after you and take your assets and stuff, and it can take control of your business, for example. So if you want to take over a country, the best thing to do is to get the country into lots of debt, and then you can start taking control of the politics in that country, and you can say, hey, you owe me money and stuff. But the thing is that you were being shifty in that you were lending them money even though you knew they couldn't pay it back, right? Which is predatory lending, and it's wrong. And also you were encouraging all these government spending programs to try and make the government go bankrupt. So in the West, there's a reason why this whole socialist government is coming in. There's a reason why the spending is outrageous and they're wasting money on psychology and psychiatry and all this sort of stuff. And it's because it's being funded behind the scenes by bankers, and they want these programs to just waste money. That's actually what they want. So then they can just keep on scoring more things from Australia. Like, for example, they might score the road network, and they can just put tolls on the roads, and then they just make all this money from tolling the Sydney Harbour Bridge or something like that. And so then you find out that it's like, hold on a second, shouldn't the roads be owned by the government? And then you're like, no, it's been privatised and it's owned by this conglomerate or whatever, and they're just milking average Joes. So we're just getting milked like there's no tomorrow. Now, the next thing, what was I going to say? About psychology and psychiatry. I'm sure I have more to say on this topic, right? Oh, I want to define what is mental illness and all this sort of stuff, because there is this idea amongst Scientology that psychiatry is full of crap and that their illnesses are made up. And it's kind of true, but it's not true at the same time. So what what happens is that certain people they're either born that way or they've had it, they were abused when they were younger, they had some bad luck or something. They get mental problems, and the mental problem could be depression. The mental problem could be anger problems. They're just angry all the time. The mental problem could be sociopathy. I don't know if that's the right word, but sociopath, where you just hate other people and you're actually a negative influence on the environment around you, and you're just no good for planet Earth, basically. And that's what Scientologists call the suppressive person, right? You're just evil, basically, because somebody fucked you up when you were like 4 years old or something like that, and you just hated people ever since. You can't get over it. You're totally A equals A. It's just like A equals A is the word to say. It's just like he's a person and she's a person and that other person's a person, and I got abused by a person when I was 5. So I hate all these people. Like, this is actually what happens. And I guarantee if I took you and I beat you up really, really hard, you might end up starting, and I did it heaps, and you might end up starting hating all these people in general. It's just a mechanism of what happens. If what happens is you'll walk around and you'll start hating people who look like me, but also you'll start hating everyone, and it's just a mechanism of how things occur. So anyway, so that's what's happened with the sociopath and the SP. They've gone through a bad experience in the past, and they're just hating everyone, right? But they really need to wake up and realize that everyone isn't that bad, and that they're gone in the head and they're not seeing reality. So see, this is the whole problem. So there are people who are gone in the head. There are people who are banging their head against the wall going, like I remember I was at a psych ward once and I saw a guy who kept on talking, and he was sort of making sense, but he was talking so quick that it was almost not making sense, but he was actually talking. So he wasn't just going blah, 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 but he was saying stuff like he was going, oh, and the Beatles song, and blah, 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 and then blah, 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 and then, oh, and the car went down the road, and he was actually like, he was stuck in like a talking frenzy, and he just wasn't stopping talking. Anyway, so mentally ill people do exist, right? And there does tend to be broad categories where you take, let's say, 1,000 people, and there will be ones that have what you could call depression, where their problem is sadness and they're upset about something in the past. And there are numerous reasons why someone gets depressed, but for whatever reason, they're feeling sad, and we say that's depression, right? Then all the people who are just angry, you say that's anger management. And then the people who are sticking their tongues down their throat, vomiting because they think they're fat, you say that person's bulimic. And the person who goes blah, 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 you say that guy's schizophrenic. And the person who's acting evil, you go, he's a sociopath, right? Which, of course, psychiatry don't diagnose that often, because a lot of the time they themselves are sociopaths. Not today, though. Actually, I want to correct people on this, because this is why there's so much to say in these videos. I can't help but just go off topic. So, because of a social engineering program run by the New World Order, right? They don't want women making babies. So they've gotten women into the workforce. And one of the things that they've gravitated towards, because women like talking, is towards psychology. So now we've just got all these women psychologists, and they're not evil. So in the 60s, when Hubbard said psychologists are evil, he was absolutely right, and there was a lot of SPs that gravitated towards that profession, and there were a lot in the 60s. Now the percentage is way smaller, and I actually think these days that politicians and lawyers, which are almost the same thing because a lot of politicians are former lawyers, those industries actually have the most amount of sociopaths, suppressive people. They've actually surpassed psychology and psychiatry, in my opinion. Because now you just got all these girls that just are following with the system. They're just like, oh, okay, I'll be a lawyer and I'll be a psychologist, and because they don't go into the building trade, you know what I mean? And we don't have like a textiles industry to put them in, because all our factories have been sent to China, right? So all these girls just do what their friends do, and they like talking. So all these girls are graduating universities as psychologists. There's tons of them. So they've filled up the industry and have actually watered down the evilness of the industry. And that's who I came across. When I sent in 2010, I went for some therapy sessions with a psychologist. I came across just a nice girl. She wasn't evil, right? So that's why, in case people who hate Hubbard and rip on him and go, what are you talking about, psychologists aren't evil or whatever, it's just like they were in the 60s. There's a bit more to it. Oh my God, I remembered another thing, right? I think I should have a pen and paper to write it down. Hold on. So go off topic. Okay, hold on. Okay. Sorry, Craig. Okay, hold on a second. So I can't remember what I was saying. It's just so easy to go off track on these things, because this is why it's like there's just so much to say. Like, I can't say one thing without explaining another thing and without explaining another thing. And on a total another topic, that's actually what it was like when I communicated with a being outside this dimension, right? I'll bring it up because this is totally off topic. And I mentioned earlier about the hallucinogenic thing. When I was having an ayahuasca ceremony once, right, I communicated. It was done the proper way with the South American rituals and all that. The guys were really good. They knew what they were doing. So I communicated with a being, I don't know what it was, my higher self, like someone from another dimension or whatever. I telepathically communicated with, I'm going to call it a him, but that could just be the way he was appearing to me so that we could communicate. But one of the messages he was trying to get across to me was that the differences between life here and life 2,000 years ago or life right now on another planet is that because things are so different, it's extremely hard to communicate. Because it's like these videos where I say one thing and I go on to the next topic and I go, oh, I've got to explain this, and you can go off on all these tangents, right? Because I'm trying to fully explain something. But when there's a gap between the knowledge base of two people, it's hard to communicate. So with me and this advanced being I was communicating with, the knowledge gap was so vast. And one of the big messages he had said for me is, you're a total dumbass, right? And you know, he was saying, you know, you're obviously way more advanced than other humans, right? You know so much more, but in the universal picture, like, there's still so much you don't know. And so it's hard for me to communicate to you. And this is literally a telepathic communication I got. I know it sounds wild. It was so cool. Because it was like it's really weird. It was like he was operating my mind or my body, right? It was like I was channeling him or something. It's pretty cool. He was operating and it's hard. It's interesting talking to someone and not really using words, but they somehow put ideas and they communicate with ideas, and you read the idea and you go, oh, I get what you mean. Oh, so you're talking about this. Oh, you're talking about that. But it's just, I don't know if it's possible to be explained, but people who get abducted by aliens and they experience telepathy, it's an interesting phenomenon. It's a total different way to communicate. Anyway, so his main message was that, like, I had questions for him, but he couldn't answer them in a way that I would understand them. So he had to dumb down massively his communication with me, right, in order to get an idea across. Because, you know, we didn't have all the time in the world. And he couldn't explain things that I couldn't understand. It was like a university top physicist communicating to a 4-year-old in kindergarten, where they have to completely dumb down themselves and just put simple ideas and the knowledge gap is just too big that it's difficult. So his actual main message was that, you got to wake up out of the social engineering programs and the brainwashing, and you got to come out of the whole mind control situation that you're in, because we're all in a mind control situation, right? We're just not aware of it. I am aware of it. But you got to come out of it, and you've got to just know so much. You have to know. He was saying, I think, he was sort of saying that, like, you need to know so much so that you can operate better, but also to communicate to him, I needed to shoot my knowledge base right up. Like, I need to know things about the Big Bang Theory. Like, he didn't say that, but stuff like that. I need to know about the Big Bang Theory. I need to know about how they blackmail politicians so that politician then forwards an agenda that's evil, but they use blackmail to forward that agenda. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of politicians are secretly blackmailed, and that's how they get the politicians to do what they want them to do. So they act like puppets. But a lot of people on the average Joes on the streets, they don't know that. They don't know that politician is secretly a pedo. They don't know that politician is secretly gay and is pretending like he's straight and is being blackmailed. And so that's why he's forwarding a negative agenda that he probably doesn't even agree with, but he has no choice because they'll expose that he's gay and he's pretending to have a family, right? So I know about these things, so I can talk to other conspiracy theories about them. But if I talk to other people who don't know about these things, it's harder to communicate. So the message from this advanced being, right? Who knows? It could be LRH. Like, honestly, who knows, right? The message was, because I don't think the LRH is reincarnated, if you haven't worked that out already. Just because I recently interviewed the guy, Lafayette Hubbard, who thinks he's a reincarnation of LRH, and I'm not going to mention anything further. So anyway, the main message was that when you know these things, when you know about how the body operates, when you know about this, when you know about that, when you just know so much, then he can communicate to me. So it's like, it's just too hard for him to communicate. It's like a toddler talking to a top physicist. So the toddler has to study all this stuff, become an adult, know all this stuff. Then at like age 20, then the top physicist can start coaching the 20-year-old much more. But at 4 years old, the toddler just knows nothing. And it's just too hard to communicate. So that's why when concepts like God come into it, and it's like, what's God? It's just like, we just don't know enough. And I'm telling you, that was actually what we dealt in when I was talking to this being, communicating with this being. God was coming up or whatever, and like, what is it, and all this sort of stuff. And a lot, in order to understand God, I think one of his message was, like, you need to just know way more, because I can't communicate to you the idea of God. One of the ideas I want to tell you that it communicated to me, I really want to let you know, and I'm going to draw it on a piece of paper here, is I found out about how evil works. And basically, you can't see it because it's like outside this dimension. But the best way to describe how evil works and how it corrupts people and how it's taking over Earth is that you have different faces, different people, different groups. So one might be a climate change group, one might be a socialist group, one might be a book club, one might be a tall black person, one might be a short white person, one might be a girl, one might be a boy. On the outside, it all appears to be different. So on the physical universe level, it's all different, right? But behind that, they're all being controlled by the same evil force, right? It's kind of like in the shops when you go to the cereal section and you see different cereal boxes, but they're all owned by the same corporation. And then that corporation is owned by another corporation that produces cereal stuff, and they're all actually owned by the same person. But on the shelf, you see all this different stuff, and you're tricked into thinking that there is variety, but there isn't. So this is how evil works, so I'll just draw it, because this is basically what I was communicated with. I'll draw different looking people. I'll put a girl with a dress on, and that sort of stuff. So, and then I'll put a fat guy. That looks so bad. That looks almost like an alien. So these people's minds, right, although on the outside they're all different, they are all part of the evil hive mind, and they're all evil. Because evil exists. That's a big thing you have to realize. It's not a made-up thing. Evil exists. And I actually think mental illness is evil, taking over people's minds. But if you have a look at this, hold on, it's a little bit tricky with my one hand. You have to look at this picture, right? So I've drawn 4 different people. I can just tell you if you're listening to this. But I've drawn 4 different people, right? Yet their minds are all connected to the evil force. So do you see that picture? So you think on the outside, you don't realize evil's taking over because you see all these different people, but they're all coming from the same force. So we can't see outside this dimension or whatever. But if we could be an advanced being and pop out and go into Theta land, right, and look in at this dimension, you can see how all these people's minds are all hooked, all these evil people are all hooked into the same evil mind. But at the moment, inside the matrix, inside this physical universe, we see separate individual people that look different and that don't appear to be connected. But in another dimension, they are connected. And it might be in the Theta dimension. Because in the Theta, it's where things aren't physical and it's all spiritual. So that's where you get evil connections and stuff that are non-physical. Just the same as you have positive Theta physical. There might be like, maybe there's not a Theta, maybe it's not a Theta dimension, it's like an evil dimension or something. That's like below the Theta dimension. But it's whatever it is, it's non-physical. But that's how it works. And that's the idea he wanted to get across to me. And he was saying that this picture here that I've drawn is the best way to describe, for you simple earthlings, it's the best way to describe how evil works and how it functions. So you got to remember that. It's different cereal boxes, but it's all the same corporation. So you got to be able to spot evil. Anyway, so one thing that also happens with psychiatry, and Alex Jones talked about this, is that psychiatry is used by intelligence agencies like the CIA to assassinate people. And Hubbard knew very much about this because this was a big thing in the 60s and stuff. So what they would do is they would have a person that they want to knock off, and they would take him for surgery with a psych, and the psych would just kill him. And then it would be passed off as he might have committed suicide, or they had a surgery that went wrong, or something like that. But they're used to assassinate people. And I'm going to put that in the comments section in this vid, because there's this awesome vid by Alex Jones where he talks about this, and it was like so good. I was just like, I think it might have been one that was like an hour long, but I was like, oh my God, everyone has to watch this video because Alex is on fire and he is exposing so much corruption in this video. You've got to hear it. Anyway, hold on a second. All right, it's so cool I got to tell you about my ayahuasca experience. Sorry, I just had a break. But I don't think I'd mentioned that before. And I just think it's good that people need to know, especially Scientologists, because they're so anti-drugs, but they just don't understand that they haven't actually stopped, analyzed, investigated drugs and looked into it, and haven't realized that there are no drug addicts that are addicted to hallucinogenics. And also that people are having spiritual experiences, they're leaving this dimension, they're communicating with other beings and stuff, they are becoming more wiser, they're leaving their body, they're having exteriorization experiences and stuff, which is just incredible because it really helps evolve the person, and it literally corrects their DNA. Like I remember when I did the ceremony, my attention went to my stomach, and I felt there was something wrong with my stomach. And because like when you take it and you go into the other dimension or whatever the aliens are, or the extra dimensional beings are, they start literally working on your body like you're in a medical doctor's thing or whatever. I think they're actually correcting the DNA. Anyway, I felt tension going into my stomach, and I was like, oh, there's something wrong with my stomach. I kept on massaging, and then later on, I had I think I had diarrhea or whatever. But whatever, it got rid of something that was in my stomach that was some sort of bug or problem or whatever. And people, after they take it, I mean, they're just much more switched on to evil. They're not easily manipulated and stuff, and it's taking humans to the next level. And so I think that ayahuasca sessions and stuff should be a normal thing that's a part of people's evolution in life and stuff, like it was for the South Americans and stuff. And it wasn't just the South Americans who were using it. I mean, witches and wizards were using it and stuff, and apparently that's where the broomstick theory came from about witches, is that they would put the hallucinogenic drug on the end of the broomstick and shove them in their vagina, and then they'll go on a spiritual journey, and it's like they're flying, right? Because they'll either exteriorize or they'll have some experience where they're going out of this universe, and then apparently that's where the idea of witches riding broomsticks came from. So that's the origin of Harry Potter and stuff. But apparently there's a lot of evidence for these sort of substances in our history, because you can get the hallucinogenics from like the acacia plant and like all these other plants. Like it's not that hard to get naturally, and they have been in our culture, but it's just not that well known for thousands of years. And the secret societies, I think, use them, like the Rosicrucians and the Freemasons and stuff. I'm not totally sure on that, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if you get to a certain level where they go, oh, okay, now you have to make the special potion, and you go and you cook up some special tea, and then you take it while you're saying some initiation rite, and then you have some spiritual experience or whatever. Like, I totally bet you one of their levels involves this. And Aleister Crowley was messing around with this sort of stuff because he was interested in basically improving himself and becoming as powerful as possible. He was working on magic. He wanted to move a teapot with his mind. He wanted to like walk up to a person and say, like let's say you want them to buy purple socks, like just by using his mind, the person goes and buys purple socks. Like he wanted to just become a full-blown OT, you know? Anyway, so I'm willing to accept any attacks or whatever for me advocating the use of hallucinogenic drugs and stuff, and all I say is that, you know, they can be used wrongly and they can be done wrongly, but, you know, they benefit a person, I'm certain of it. The stuff that goes on, and yes, someone can have a bad trip, right, but that is basically the fact that the person already has anxiety or whatever, and then when they take the hallucinogenic, it puts them through the nightmare experience that gave them the anxiety, and so they just got to run through the experience and stop crying and just put up with it and then move on and then improve in life. It's like saying that somebody running an engram, or you shouldn't run engrams because the person was crying when they were running the engram, and it's just like, no, you have to go through these traumatic experiences. And so when someone takes a bad trip, they're usually a weak person who likes to run away from things. They're getting sent straight into what their real issue is, and the aliens are trying to work them on that and help them with that. I should probably use the word extra-dimensional because they're like spirits or whatever. They're giving the person this nightmare experience because they're going straight to the problem area. They're finding the basic on that person, and then if the person resists it and runs away from it, they can then run away and go, oh, I had a bad experience on ayahuasca or whatever, and I disagree with it or whatever. And so, you know, it's like that person's just an idiot, and they need to basically go in there and do it again and do a proper ceremony and actually handle the emotional issue that it brought up and stuff. Anyway, so, yes, the CIA uses psychs to knock off people for political reasons, basically. And back in the 60s, they were using the psych wards to lock up people that they wanted to get for political reasons. So let's say that they wanted to get rid of L. Ron Hubbard, but they couldn't catch him on a crime to put him in jail, but they could say he's crazy. So, yeah, let's get some psychs to say that he's crazy and say that he's dangerous, and then we'll lock him up in a psych ward, and it's basically like a prison. So, the psych wards were being used in this shifty way. And it's not, and also on that topic, I don't really disagree with psych wards. I just think that they shouldn't be electroshocking people in them, and they shouldn't be giving them damaging drugs, and they should be a nice place. But when you've got psychologists and psychiatrists who are working there who are sort of tend to be evil, then of course and when they're taken over by the drug companies, of course they're going to start doing bad things to their patients, right? But I'm actually for these nutters being locked up basically in psych wards. And yes, there is going to be the occasional person who's put there for political reasons, but there are people who are put in jails for political reasons. So do you believe that we should get rid of jails? No, because now they got rid of psych wards because they privatized them to try and make money and stuff. The politicians made money off selling the land and stuff. Now they just, if they want to get rid of someone who's exposing the truth about alien abduction, they just put kiddie porn on his computer, and then he gets busted by the cops for kiddie porn, even though he's innocent, and he gets locked up. So people get locked up in a psych ward or in a jail, and it's just like these things get used in the wrong way. And I don't think the solution is to just get rid of psych wards. I don't agree with that. I think that there are people who are nutters who actually don't commit crimes, even though a lot of the nutters do commit crimes. A lot of these mentally ill people do commit crimes, and they get let free and stuff. Anyway, there are nutters who I do think need to be locked up. And yes, there will be the occasional person that will be locked up for political reasons, but that's just how things are in this crazy earth. Like with the jails, they get used for the wrong reason, and there's nothing we can do about it. But the main thing, I think, is to try and have police, instead of catching people speeding in their car, actually looking into psychs that are doing wrong things as doctors, and look into stuff like electroshock therapy, right? And like maybe they shouldn't do those sorts of things. And so then we'll have psych wards where people aren't getting tortured in them. That's probably the better solution to the situation. Because I think some Scientologists out there think that we should just totally get rid of psych wards and just not have them. And it's just like, no, I don't want those nutters walking the streets. I mean, they end up, especially with all the people with ADD these days, because of the with autism these days, because they're so similar. And that gets me onto a whole nother thing, classification. I've gone off topic, but with nutters walking around the streets and not locked up in psych wards, then they end up just killing people and shit and causing problems. And they're better off being looked after. And if you talk to someone who's the parent of one of these nutters, they say, no, I want my daughter locked up. Like, I don't want her on the streets and stuff. She needs care and attention and stuff. And when she's on the street, she just does crazy things. And the next minute, she's jumping off a bridge, or running out in front of car traffic and just getting hit by a car. And then some poor person comes along and is like, oh my God, I killed someone. And they feel bad, but it was really the person just jumped out, and they need to get over it. Anyway, so with classification, there's another reason as well why psychs still get a decent amount of income even though they don't really have any cures. It's because judges respect the opinion of psychs. So when somebody's got in trouble with the police, for example, they can't just get a report from a Scientologist saying this person's sane. The judge will be like, well, who the hell is a Scientologist? So what you'll need is, they go, you want one from a respectable psychologist. So the psychologist then has a business where basically people who have broken the law go up to the psychologist and say, can you give me a psychologist review, and either say that I am mentally stable and can look after my children and I should have the kids for 2 weeks or whatever, if it's a family law court case, or, I stole a car and I want to get away with it, so I'm pleading mental illness, so, I'm going to go see this psychologist and he's going to evaluate me and I'm going to make myself out to be really crazy, and I'll give him like $3,000 and he'll do a report, and then the judge will see it and it says that this guy's really crazy, and then the judge makes him do therapy as opposed to doing jail time. So that's also why psychologists are getting good money in they're cemented in the system. The system respects them. So there are literally psychologists out there who charge $5,000, right, for like 3 hours of consultation, right? And then they write a report up and they've got a respected reputation, and it goes to the judge and it helps that person win a court case. So that's why these psychologists are still around and are still like people, like it's not forgotten about as an industry, because they're in with the lawyers and the judges and all that stuff. That system respects them. And if the person also gets disciplined by the legal system, like let's say he stole a car and he's been ordered to do community work, and not go to jail, but to do community work for like 200 hours, right? He might also get ordered to see a psychologist to get emotional therapy over the crime that he did, and so that he reforms and becomes a good citizen and doesn't steal cars again. So the judge will actually order that the guy has to see a psychologist. So the judges aren't ordering that he has to go see a Scientologist, or the judges aren't ordering that he has to go do meditation on Bali for a weekend, right? Because those things actually work and help and improve the person. No, the system, right? And the judges are being paid by the government, so it's all the system, it's all the business of milking the taxpayer. The system prescribes that he goes and sees a psychiatrist. So that's why there are psychiatrists that are making money because the person wants to win a court case, and then they're making money because the judge ordered that this client has to come, and then also they're making money because the government's paying for the therapy and the person's getting it for free because you've got government health care. So that's how you can keep the scam going, in that they don't actually understand the mind, they don't actually have any cures, but they keep on making money and keep on existing because it's like they're in bed with the whole corrupt, messed up system of milking the taxpayer. So this is why it's complex, but when you look at it all, you can understand how it all works, and you're like, this is just ridiculous. It's just disgusting. And this is what happens when you say it's okay for the government not to spend money on essential services. These sorts of crazy shit, just this sort of crazy stuff happens. So, with the classification thing, like I was saying, yes, there are, and this is what you learn in Scientology, how we use the word aberration, that there are people who, we're not clear, we're not perfect. People have certain issues. And yes, people have similar issues. So you might have an issue of anger, and Joe Blow down the street also has that same issue. And then the psychologists come in and say, he's got, I don't know what the word is, but he's got anger disorder or something like that. And that actually, I think I agree with that. Like when it comes to anger, depression, anxiety, so the person's nervous or whatever, bulimic. There are certain similar aberrations that people have, and I think it's okay to label that and say that person has autism, right? But in a situation with the autism, see, this is where it's like I'm going to go off topic again now because I'm going to go into autism. That's such a freaking broad general term that it's ridiculous. Like, you can see some people who are clearly autistic and they should have that label because it's just a good label to pin to that aberration that people share, right? But they've made the definition of autism so broad that they can then just medicate anyone. And anyone can come to them and they can just go, yeah, you've got autism, great, here, take a drug, and now I've made money off you. Do you see what I mean? So, this is what Scientologists were saying. They were saying, and this is what Hubbard was trying to say, is that the psychs are full of bullshit because they don't really have science to back up their diagnoses, and they're just classifying everyone as being depressed and stuff, and it's bullshit. And he's right. And they're coming up with all these names for mental illnesses. They're coming up with this one, this one, this one. It's just like, no. Let's just stick to like 20 and that's it. Or like 15 or whatever. The basic ones, depression, anxiety, bulimic, autism, schizophrenia. What are some of the other? There might be a few more. Drug addict, that's a mental illness. Homosexuality, that's a mental illness. It is. I'm serious. So they're just clear, classic ones that people suffer from. And sociopathy, that we should have like maybe 20 and that's it, and not go into ridiculous things where they say that somebody has like oppositional defiance disorder and just like they just go through the window in just like labeling. And it's also what the hell's the point of why do we need that many labels? It's just not necessary, Anyway, so the classification is a load of crap, and I think it has a lot to do with the fact that the more things that they can classify, they can come up with more drugs for, and it's like a money maker thing. You know what I mean? It's like going to a car mechanic and him saying, "Oh, you got this, and it's just like, dude, it's only like 2 things wrong with my car. You're just trying to sell me on more services, So, what else? They're used in a political way, because I mentioned the homosexuality thing. Homosexuality used to be classified as a mental illness, right? But because, like I said, psychiatry is corrupted and taken over and used for political reasons and to sell drugs and stuff, psychiatry now doesn't classify transgenders and homosexuals, and a lot of them are the same. They're homosexuals, and then they go, "Oh, I'm actually supposed to be a boy or whatever," and then, "Oh, I'm supposed to be a girl," and then they suddenly now they're transgenders. And anyway, so these things, transgenders, right, which I'll definitely put as one of the mental illness things. I'll put it separate to homosexuality. These, for political reasons, the New World Order, the secret government, right, is running programs where they're trying to promote homosexuality, for example. So they say, well, we don't want people thinking badly of homosexuality. We don't want them thinking it's an illness. So let's stop that being classified as a mental illness and say that it's hateful for you to say it's a mental illness. And let's pretend like there's nothing wrong with their reproductive systems and they're actually healthy, normal people. And they're clearly not. Like, it's clearly something wrong with the homosexual. I mean, sorry, I've just got to say, it's so obvious. You've been granted a dingling, and like the dingling's supposed to go in a certain other spot in order to produce children, and that's how the family unit works, and that's how we procreate and how we continue the race going on into the future, and that's how things are supposed to be naturally. So you might be born with a defective one, or you might have been abused with, you might have been born with defective DNA, or you might have been abused as a young kid or something like that, and ever since then you hate women, so now you love guys. And this is why it's a mental illness, because it's like, I mean, if you look into it, the amount of guys, the homosexual guys who were abused when they were kids, and they were abused by a man sexually, and so now suddenly they abuse other kids, boys, and they pass on the corruption that they received, and they're homosexuals. I knew a guy once who was a drug addict, and they also tend to be drug addicts as well. See, these mental illnesses as well, they tend to come as packages, as like a package deal. Like, you'll have someone that's like depressed and also a drug addict, a homosexual and also a sociopath. And so they come as, and also maybe a drug addict. So they just tend to come together as a package, right? They can come individually. Anyway, there was this guy who was a drug addict, and he was also like a closet homosexual. And his dad, I think, was making him give... His dad was forcing him to give him blowjobs or something like that. He was forced to give blowjobs to his dad. So his dad was sexually perverted, and anyway, he got abused. But anyway, so he grows up as an adult to be a drug addict and a homosexual, and that's not surprising at all. That's just totally what you would expect. Now, if homosexuality wasn't a mental illness, then you wouldn't get all these homosexuals being abused when they were younger. You would just have all these people with good upbringings, and then they're homosexual. But we don't get that. So what you get is, if you take kids that are abused, have just had a bad upbringing, they are much more likely to be homosexual. And if you take kids and you give them a great upbringing, right, they're less likely to be homosexual, right? And so that indicates that homosexuality is a mental illness problem. It is a mental thing. Next thing is that homosexuals tend to have mental problems like the drug addiction, the sociopathy, maybe bulimia or whatever, maybe autism. So that again indicates, so this person is not quite right in the head, right? But I was just watching a video on YouTube the other day. So homosexuality is a mental health problem. It is a mental illness. It is. Hubbard was right. It's an aberration. Because Scientologists always had this idea that it was an aberration, right? And when I say mental health, I just mean aberration. It's the same thing. It's just different words. You know, you can say Joe Blow's aberrated, or you can say he's got autism. There's the same thing. Or you can say that guy's got depression, and that's a mental health problem. Or you can say he's aberrated and it's making him sad. It's just all language. There's no difference. Because I know some sires had a go at me for saying, for promoting the idea that mental health problems actually exist. And I'm just like, what are you saying? You're saying that people aren't aberrated? Because, you're just picking faults in words. Who cares what words are used? It's just it's all the same ideas that are being expressed. It's just different words to express the same idea. Anyway, I was watching this video on YouTube, right, where this chick was talking about antisocial personality. And that's basically a sociopath, just an SP. That's an actual mental health problem. There are people out there who are just SPs, and they suffer from this mental illness of hating others because they were probably damaged in the past. And that's their mental health problem. That instead of them looking in the mirror and thinking that they're fat, like people who are bulimic, right, the person's not fat, but they look in the mirror and they see a fat person, right? So they're gone in the head and they've got bulimia. They're aberrated, right? When people who are evil, they're suffering from being a sociopath, from being an SP. And so what that means is that when they look in the mirror and they see a person standing next to them in the mirror, that person they consider to be a threat to their environment, and they're scared of that person. So they've got to control that person, they've got to damage that person, right? They don't see themselves as a threat, but they walk around and they see someone at the bus stop and they see that person as a threat. That person is not a threat. That person's nice. They see me. I'm nice. I'm trying to help people, trying to educate them with these videos. I'm actually a really good person. But they see me as a threat and danger. And so they think that they've got to suppress me. So they're gone in the head. You have to understand that they're looking at a cup. I'm holding up a cup right now. I can see a cup. They're looking at it and they are seeing an orange. So the bulimic person is gone in the head. They're looking at a skinny person in the mirror and they're seeing a fat person. The sociopath, the evil person, these top bankers, they're looking in the street, they're watching TV, and they are seeing evil people everywhere. They're thinking everyone's evil. They're gone in the head. They're not right. Something happened to them in the past, and suddenly they think everyone's evil and bad, just like that person who was bad to them when they were 5 years old. They're wrong. They're completely wrong. They're gone in the head. And they don't realize it. They don't realize that they're seeing an orange and calling it an apple or whatever. They're gone. This is why these people actually need objective processes. But you're going to have a lot of problems trying to get them into session. But that's what they need. They need hours and hours of objective processes where they actually stop and touch a wall and look at it and go, oh, wow, there's a wall there. And they start seeing things, and then they do SOP8C and they start being commanded, and then they're like, oh, I can be told what to do and it's okay and stuff. And because SPs always need to be in control because they're in emergency mode. They're constantly survival. Oh my God, there's all these dangerous people around them. This is what it's like walking around being an SP. You have to understand what it's like to be in their shoes. Because Because we think, why the fuck are these evil bankers trying to control us and doing all this evil stuff and these evil psychs electroshocking people? But you don't know what it's like walking around in their shoes where they're going, oh, scary person, oh, that person's mean to me, oh, that person thinks bad. And so, like, if you could see what everyone looks like to them, instead of seeing nice, normal people, they're just seeing dark, evil demons or something everywhere. So that's why they act the way they do. They're gone in the head, they're not right. Anyway, so these mental problems exist, and actually you could say that planet Earth, the reason why planet Earth is a problem is because it's been taken over by sociopaths. It's basically got a mental health problem, the whole of Earth, and that's why Hubbard needed to come here and de-aberrate people and clear people to try and fix things up, right? Because Earth was being overwhelmed by nutters, basically. You know, because people think that to be a nutter, you have to be someone banging their head against the wall, right? Or somebody looking in the mirror saying, oh, I'm fat when I'm not fat. You know what I mean? It's not that obvious. Sometimes the guy walks around and he can look normal and he can be nice and he can be polite, but he is actually scared of people and he hates people and he sees them as a threat. But when he talks to them, he goes, oh, hi, thank you. Yes, that was very good. And he looks at them and he's nice and polite. But behind the doors, he'll then say, yeah, let's put cancer viruses in their vaccines. Or he'll be like, yeah, let's become a banker and like I want to take over the world because I feel so scared and insecure. And a lot of the people that are right at the top, they are these sociopaths and they're scared and stuff. That's why they've risen to the top, because they've felt threatened. They felt like they had to be in control. They're control freaks. Right, the control freak is a sociopath because they have to be in control. See what I mean? If you're relaxed and you feel safe, you don't need to be a billionaire. Do you know what I mean? But these real top bankers, they need to control society because they're scared and they're paranoid. So Earth is literally run by nutters, but the talented ones. So with the homosexuality thing, because they were trying to run a social engineering program, they've corrupted psychiatry, so now homosexuality isn't called a mental health problem, and it's just classified now, through all the brainwashing in the media, it's classified as being a noble thing. So now it's noble to be gay. It's a good thing. It's really good to be a transgender. It's really sick because transgender is a whole new level. It's just like, that is so obvious it's a mental health problem. It's beyond belief. Like you might have an argument with the gay thing. You might have an argument that it's not a mental health problem. And it's natural. But I tell you what, with transgenders, there's no way those people aren't mentally ill. They are the screaming definition of mentally ill. And that's why, what do you get? Like I said with the package things, when they're transgenders, they also tend to be homosexuals, which is a mental illness problem. They also tend to be sociopaths. They also tend to be lefties. They also tend to commit suicide. They also tend to be drug addicts. They come as a package. Transgenders is not right, and they shouldn't be encouraging little kids with emotional issues and who are confused to chop off their dicks. It's sick. It's beyond belief evil. It's a vaccine level evil. It's still not worse than vaccines. Vaccines take the cake because they just conned everyone, putting cancer viruses in them and putting chemicals that give people autism. And that's just epic. But anyway, transgenders is wild. So what you do is you get psychiatry basically now being used to promote homosexuality. Instead of saying, no, there's something wrong with you and you need to get better, right? They say, no, it's a noble thing, it's good. You just have, they classify homosexuality now as sexual attraction crisis or something. Basically, something that's like, I can't remember what it is, but something that's like the person's uncomfortable with their sexuality. And the person needs therapy and to probably take side drugs so that they're more comfortable with who they are and being gay. And so they're basically encouraging people to be gay. It's just ridiculous. So psychology gets used to help promote New World Order social engineering programs. That's also why it's evil. So I think I'm at the end of this briefing. I don't know what else to say. Yeah. So I guess I'll just summarize. There's just, because I've been talking a while, there's lots of reasons why psychology and psychiatry is not really that good. I think there is a use for them. Like, I think that they need to not be taken over by political forces and by big pharma, and I think they need to start adopting actual real cures. Besides just talking, like actually proper talk therapy and stuff. I think the fact that psychology and psychiatry don't work, it's shown in, there's all these other practices like Scientology and Avatar and men's boot camps, and just like there's all these, and meditation, there's all these alternative things that people are going to get mental health help, right? So if they were doing such a good job, then all these other practices wouldn't be around. And these other things are existing without government funding and with government attacks. These things are being attacked by evil guys who are in control of our governments. They're using our governments to try and shut down these alternative things, like the Church of Scientology being shut down because it was infiltrated and taken over by the government. So anyway, it's just wild. But it is quite a deep subject. Like, if you actually study it and you master it, you find out about the New World Order, and you find out about this and that, and it leads you down a rabbit hole of corruption. It's like, I guess, starting with 9/11 as a conspiracy, and then you then look into Sandy Hook, and then you look into another one, and then you find out, wow, everything isn't what we think, and it's all just corrupted and a load of shit. Also, I haven't mentioned the uni courses and stuff on psychology and psychiatry. So because the profession's been corrupted, it doesn't really make sense. Like, if you do the university degrees on these subjects, you're not really going to leave them being a master of the mind and actually understanding things about the mind. They'll go on about Freud, but Freud didn't even really know that much about what was going on. He did have some good ideas, right? Like I think he promoted the idea that if you talk about something that happened earlier in your life, it can alleviate symptoms that are occurring to that person today. And that idea got extrapolated with Dianetics by L. Ron Hubbard. That idea got extrapolated and he created Dianetics. So there are some good ideas in Freud, but also he's just totally wrong about things, and I wouldn't call him a master of the mind. Not at all. When you study Scientology and when you study all these other things, then you can start calling yourself a master of the mind, and you can actually understand how things worked. But Freud did not understand how things worked. Oh, there's something else as well. Psychs are used to come up with like social engineering programs. So not just to like promote ones that are already been come up with, like the depopulation one and encouraging people to be gay. Psychologists behind the scenes working for governments actually come up with these programs in the first place. So because they know about how the mind works, right, and they do surveys on society and they work out, well, in order to depopulate in order to reduce the population, we need to do this, this, and this, and we need to get people thinking this way. Basically, they fuck with our heads. And they come up with programs by the government to fuck with our heads. Is basically the reason why. Because you don't get a builder. A builder doesn't know about this sort of stuff. But a psychologist knows about how the mind works. Not that much, but they know some things. And they come up with shifty government programs and social engineering programs. Like a lot of these things that I actually complain about, I harp on about the social engineering programs, and Alex Jones hones on about them, right? These things have been created by psychologists behind the scenes in like 1952. Like back then, evil psychs were like writing these things and coming up with these sick, perverted ideas. And this is why, this is what Hubbard knew and stuff. And this is why he knew he needed to take out psychology, because it's just a bad thing. There was one more thing. So, gosh, I can't remember. Social. I really want to say it because I'm just doing a thorough briefing here and I want to let you know everything. Just wait for a moment. I guess that's it. I'm just trying to think. There's not much more. About the university degrees. They are. You're not going to learn that much about the mind. You're not going to be some master of the mind and stuff after doing them. And because the universities are shit as well at just teaching people and stuff, you're probably going to be more dumbed down and confused about things because you're going to think that you understand something, but you don't quite understand it. And you're going to have these misunderstoods and stuff. And you'll actually become dumber by studying these things at university. And the government funds university courses. So, of course, there's no university course on how to be a Scientologist, right? But there is one on how to be a psychologist. So the government, again, is supporting this industry psychology by giving people loans in order to get degrees to become psychologists. So this is, again, why it's all a part of the big scam. And it's all a big joke. Also, psychologists are responsible for coming up with pain, drug, and hypnosis, which is basically where you take a guy, you abduct him, you torture him, you give him drugs, and then you tell him, you think you're a chicken, And when you hear the word Apple cars, you're going to think you're a chicken. And then when he goes out on the street, you say Apple cars, and he goes, because he's hypnotized, he goes, and he thinks it's a chicken, right? But they obviously don't care about people becoming chickens, but they use it for assassination purposes. So they say, you're going to assassinate the Queen or something like that. And when we show you the Ace of Spades card, you're going to assassinate the Queen. So then they send the person out, they're hypnotized, right? Then the agent walks up to the guy when the Queen is in the area and flashes in front of his eyes an Ace of Spades card. The guy goes, oh, and goes into the hypnosis, and then as a mind control robot, goes into and kills the Queen. So this is how I reckon they got rid of John Lennon. This is how they got rid of Martin Luther King. This is how they were trying to get rid of L. Ron Hubbard. And L. Ron Hubbard was trying to expose these mind control thingos. Well, it's the psychologists who helped perfect this pain drug hypnosis thing and who were treating people. So they would take a poor guy and they would abduct him, and it was the psychologist who was giving him the hypnotic suggestion saying, go and assassinate L. Ron Hubbard. And Captain Bill exposed this with psychologists in Los Angeles. So that's another evil thing that psychologists are doing, is that they're mind controlling people. So overall, they actually seem like quite an evil profession, and they've just got a lot of government support. And actually, I think this is also why they don't want psychologists doing a good job, because if you're a psychologist and you're actually doing a good job and you come across a guy who's been mind programmed, the government's not going to like you. The CIA is not going to like you. And this is why they didn't like Scientology, because Scientology therapy was actually worked and you could spot how someone had been mind controlled. And so they thought, shit, we don't want Scientology being the big subject about the mind. We've got to make sure that only psychology and psychiatry are the big subjects about the mind, because they do a shit job and they don't find out about these mind control victims. Whereas if Scientology took over the mental health industry, which it was supposed to, in a perfect world it would, well, then all these Scientologist auditors would be exposing all these people and going on TV and saying, hey, I've got another patient here who's been mind controlled by the CIA. So this is why they came after Scientology and how they had to shut it down, and how they've made sure that psychology and psychiatry are dumbed down as subjects so that the mind control victims are not exposed. So there's so many things going on in this world and in psychology and psychiatry. But I would recommend you to watch the Industry of Death DVD, which will be in the comment section, because that's a good conspiracy DVD about psychology and stuff. And I don't think it's that exaggerated. I watched it again recently now that I know everything about it, because I watched it back in 2010 before I knew what was going on in the world, but I watched it within the past few years now that I really knew about how the world works. And honestly, I watched it and I said, that's not an exaggeration. At the end of it, I was like, that's actually true. Now, they use scary music and dark sounds, and those sorts of things are manipulative, and they exaggerate the evilness of psychiatry, right? So that's probably exaggerating it with the dark, scary music and scary pictures and stuff. So it's got that manipulative effect to it, but the actual facts they're talking about are pretty accurate, and they're not exaggerated. So watch that. I've also got this Alex Jones vid that's going to be in the comment section, and it talks about psychologists, right? I can't remember which one is a video I'm going to put the link to, but it might also be one that's like an hour long that just covers so many topics, and one of the things that he mentions is psychology, which is cool, but he mentions all these other things. He talks about the weather control. He talks about psychiatrists killing people. He talks about just the social engineering programs. He is on fire in this interview, and I think it's because Eddie Bravo is a nice guy, because I think it's with Eddie Bravo in it, and it brings out the best in Alex, and he's just on fire, and he just drops a bomb, and I was like, this is fantastic, and I was like, people have to watch this video. It's such good information. In fact, Eddie Bravo is the nice guy that Joe Rogan's taking advantage of, because Joe Rogan's actually a 1-1, and 1-1's he's got some sociopath tendencies, Joe Rogan. He's a bit of a lefty. He's still an awesome guy. Like, he's done so much good for the world, but he is a bit of a sociopath. And so sociopaths tend to have this weaker, crippled person around them who's really nice, who basically puts up with their shit. And that's actually Eddie Bravo. He's actually a really cool, nice guy. And he's actually PDS to Joe Rogan. And there are people around Joe Rogan who have committed suicide. And I think it's because Joe's the 1-1 in the situation. He's the sociopath. He's the SP. And that's why some of his friends have killed himself. And Eddie is getting keyed in by Joe Rogan, and he's probably saying little comments to put him down and stuff. And so he's really a nice guy. And so I could see how when Eddie was with Alex Jones, just by himself, Alex was interviewing Eddie, he had that niceness and that softness and stuff, and it brought out the best in Alex, right? And really, what Eddie should do is, he'll never see this video, but it'll be so cool if he sees it. The best thing for Eddie to do, if you're listening to this, or if someone knows him, or whatever, is to you should end your association with Joe Rogan. Just end it. He's not good. Like, he's saving humanity, but at the same time, he's not good to have as a friend. I know it's some weird paradox. It's just like, I don't know how that makes any sense. But his podcast is just blowing the lid off the truth about things on planet Earth. But he is negative for you, Eddie, and if I wouldn't be close friends with him, because he's a backstabber, and he's backstabbed Alex Jones and stuff, and he's obviously been doing some backstabby stuff to some of the other friends who have killed themselves. So I would avoid Joe Rogan. But I would love to be on this podcast. That would be so cool. And I would love to hang out with him once or twice, but I would not be best friends with him at all. He's a 1-1. 1-1's no good. They're sociopaths. Anyway, that's it for this psychiatry briefing. I hope you liked it. It was wide. It was out there. I told you a little secret about me and hallucinogenics, that I actually support the use of them, and I've gotten benefit from using them, which was really out there. And I know Scientologists have problems with that, but hey, you just get the full-blown truth. And I also mentioned how I support euthanasia, which is, again, is going to cause some problems. But anyway, Take care of yourself. You've been listening to the Indie Scientology podcast. I've been your host, Andy, not just Space Cowboy. So remember, what you thought was impossible is possible.